Well, good morning, everybody. This is Chief Prophet Tala Price, and I am having the privilege of walking you through this month's series for our Sunday school, where we're talking about how idols, can be developed or created over time in the soul, right? We've often heard of idols of the heart. And so if you had an opportunity to this week walk through our Sunday school, then you'll see that our focus is how the soul actually creates an idol. Why? Because in this season, as I addressed in the opening of the last broadcast, God is dealing with and battling with our soul idols, how much it is affecting our ability to hear, to obey, and to move forward in the things that He has given us to do. There's so much He wants to tell us. There's so much He wants to prepare us for. But every time His word is meeting the interference of idols that are there, that are buried in our heart, whether it's idols of hope, idols of expectation, idols of my life didn't turn out the way I wanted to, idols of family, idols of church hurt, as we have now dubbed it in this generation, right? Idols of I wish I was something else, idols of identity. All of those things can come up and serve as an interference between you and God and what he is calling you to accomplish. And so all of these unresolved issues that are literally fueling idolatry. And how do you know it's fueling idolatry? Because you refuse to move forward without it, right? It's blocking, it's stopping, it's shutting you down. It's creating immobility in your relationship with God and your ability to move forward in His purpose, His calling, and destiny for your life. Heretofore, we thought idolatry was something that was, so obvious in terms of, oh, that's something that I'm worshiping and all of that. But it's not necessarily so. Idols can literally not just be, but idols can manifest themselves as literal areas that cause immobility and that cause us to really stop being able to do excuses, barriers, for our obediences, right? And so I think that we can all relate to that because we've all been there in some form or fashion. But idols are not something that you wake up in the morning and decide you're going to have. They can build over time by vows that were made and things, believe it or not, that we've not resolved or can't reconcile about our life. And they can literally become a monument. We build a whole monument to that reality, a whole monument to that issue, a whole monument to that circumstance. And so that's what we're going to be addressing this month. Y'all ready to address this? All right. We're going to get into it. And this, I said last time, was motivated by a word that God gave me back in 2023 is what I believe it was, which is what you're seeing here on the screen. When He said, in this season, I'm not going to have any other gods before me. Okay. No other gods before me. That's kind of what we're looking at. And so when we're dealing with the idols of the heart, we have to deal with the gods that we have placed before the Lord. Right? Because we've placed some idols before the Lord. And so He is not doing that in this era. This is the era of what He says is all or nothing. I'm going to have all of you or I'm going to have none of you. Right? It goes back to the garden experience. He said to Adam, we're not co-sharing. So I'm either going to have all of you, I'm going to be the only God of your heart, or I'm going to pull out and I'm not going to be anything. Because I'll have no other gods before me. I'm not going to compete for affections. I'm not going to compete for loyalty and faithfulness. I am not going to compete, says God, in this season. So we're coming into the hour of choose ye this day whom you will serve. Right? So if you're just joining us for this Sunday school class, we're talking about idols of the heart and how your soul creates an idol. Okay. How does that end up happening? Because if you're like most people, you didn't wake up and say, I'm going to choose another God. You didn't wake up and say, oh, I'm going to just build an idol. But there were confessions, small vows, small lines in the sand where it was like, I'm not going to do this unless, okay, if it costs me this, then, so there's small things that happen along the way that create the building blocks of the material for our idols, right? Where they say how they say they go and chop down the tree and then they chop up the wood and then they carve it and then they erect it and then worship it, right? So we do that over time. We go and find the trees we're going to chop down. Listen, if this is going to cost me my money, chop. If this is going to cost me my house, chop. If this is going to cost me my job, chop. I don't want it to cost this relationship. Chop. I don't want to have to, face off with fears and insecurities and all those things. Chop. So you end up just chopping, right? You chop down certain trees, foundations, pillars, things in your life, things that God put there to help you obey the purpose and the call that you have. So you chop them down and then you put them up in those small little pieces, change the purpose and change the use of it so that now it becomes an image, okay? An image of life that you have to have, an image of life that you have to live, an image of expectation, an image of how your prophecy was going to play out, an image of how destiny would have looked by now, an image in your mind, an image, because idols start with images, right? So we have these images in our hearts and in our minds about how things should have looked and played out. That suddenly become idols and we don't realize it. We went from imagining to idol, right? Hoping to idol. How did we get there? Well, stay with me through the series and we'll talk through it. But this is that season where God wants to be first again, where we need to go and start scrubbing our images, right? Scrubbing our imaginations and realigning them back with the Lord and back with what the Lord said. So that means that God's got to clean a lot of things out of us so that we can hear again what he actually said. And I can relate to that because, to be honest with you, I went through a season like that where I just I told God, I said, wait a minute, you gave me this prophecy and this word from whatever year it was. And I said, and you told me this, that, and the other thing. And he said, actually, if we were being honest and real, okay, that's not what I said. That's what you heard, but that is not really what I said. That wasn't the prophecy. And I said, what? That wasn't the prophecy. What are you talking about? He said, that wasn't the prophecy. Okay. And I said, oh Lord. And he said, if you go back now and read and re-listen to what I told you from that era objectively, without the imaginations of your heart, you'll see I never lied to you. I told you the complete truth. And you interpreted that truth to your own advantage. Ooh, how many of y'all can say, ooh, sometimes I've interpreted a truth to my own advantage, okay? And then sealed it as what was the promised word of the Lord. Yes. And so even a prophecy in this circumstance can become an idol. You can turn prophecy into the idol of your imagination, the idol of your expected hope, which you needed that prophecy to be. And it's not necessarily what God spoke. Right? What you needed. I needed that prophecy to be a certain thing because of what it represented in my life at the time, what I was going through in that season and how I was using that prophecy to literally salve, as salve on open wounds and sores and things in my life that hope was blotting. At the time, it was blotting, a lot of hurt and pain. So I was using that expected hope to blot the pain. And so as a result, I turned that prophecy into an idol or imagination of the heart. And we can all do that. That's just giving you a basic example of how you can do that. You can end up turning it into a particular idol where now you don't know how years later you're stuck. You can't move forward. You can't get past it. You don't know how to move on with your life. That's how you know that you've been dealing more with an idol, right? Than the truth, an idol than the word of the Lord, an idol than your actual purpose, an idol than what he actually ordained as your destiny. Where it says that scripture, God will give me the desires of my heart. And sometimes our heart desire can become so idolatrous that we're willing to risk our relationship with God. Okay. So that we can have that pleasure, that desire. That's when you're dealing with an idol, when you're like literally really willing to put things of God, your worship, your relationship with Him, your service, all of that, you're willing to put that on the altar or risk it for this other thing or because of something else. So those are just some key factors we're going to address throughout the series when we're dealing with idols. So God said back in last year, this was October, I think, of 22 or 23, that He is no longer negotiating for His place as first in our lives. We talked about that last time. So now you have to ask yourself, what is truly first? And how do you know what's first? Well, start with what's the first thing that comes to my mind when when God asks me to do something, when there's an obedience that has to be fulfilled, when there is something that prophecy that comes to me or anything. What's the first thought? So you have to start knowing how to prioritize your first by knowing the first thought that comes to your mind when you are interacting and engaging with something related to God, your purpose, your destiny, your calling, your life, or relationship with Him. What's your first thought? That first thought is a good indicator of where your idol might be or begin. Right? So God says, someone says to you, oh, I see you, traveling around the world. First thought, but what about my family? What about my marriage? What about this? Okay, then you know what's truly first. Because we say God first, meaning that He's just bigger, right? He's just the larger piece and larger element that we can't escape. But you have to now evaluate, is He really first, right? So first thoughts. So take a moment today. If you're taking notes and you've got your journal out, you've got your Bible out, you're in your cozy chair with us this morning for this Sunday school class, I want you to go ahead and write down just yourself. It's only us, okay? Us and a few friends here today. So go ahead and just take the time to write out. What is my first thoughts? What are my first thoughts when I'm, God asks me something, wants something from me, is changing something in my life, corrects me, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, but go and write down what your typical first thoughts are. Now be honest in your journal. You might as well. Because we already know that God really does know our hearts, right? And what we're actually thinking. And He's a discerner between those thoughts and intents on top of it all. So I want you to go in and begin to start dealing with that by writing those things down, because you need to examine what first is, okay? And who is first. All right. So that's going to be your first exercise out of this series that you want to do personally. Now, He said, and this was back in that time, that it was the month of the hard reset. And since then, our lives have been being nothing but reset by everything between world events and, elections and, economy and all of this. We've been nothing but reset. But a lot of that is God, because God's doing a lot of this to capture our attention, because we would have been very content to just coast along on what we're doing. And, it'd be us, God, and our family of idols, in our lives, just coasting along. But God doesn't want to do that. He said something so powerful to me. He said, no, I'm going to start busting out like Dagon in this season. Okay. Especially here in our own country, because I'm not going to compete with another. It will never happen. Jesus never does number two. He walks away before He does number two. And so a lot of times people won't even realize that He's left their life, and it's their idol. It's not until your idol stops feeding your passion, stops hitting that sweet spot, or as Dr. Price would say, that bliss fix. It's not until your idol stops giving you that bliss fix that you realize that God has left you. Because when that bliss fix leaves and you have nothing there, okay, no power, no resources, no solical, anything there to help you get through your situations and circumstances, that, okay, you realize God's left your life. And what's been fueling your life, or the pseudo power, or what's been giving you pseudo power, is really your idol. And when your idol stops meeting your expectations, your fantasies, and your pleasures, that's when you realize you have nothing. You're subsisting really on nothing. And so this is that season where God is going to begin to start revealing in our lives. I keep telling us we're coming into the era of when God goes silent, right? Where we're going to really start finding out that it wasn't Him talking, okay, at all. It was our idols talking to us. And we'll go through that when we go back through Ezekiel, right? It's our idols talking to us. It wasn't God, okay, saying something to us at that time, but that was the spirit fueling our life. And it wasn't until it started to crash and burn, or God allowed us to now just subsist on that, and he's stepped back and stepped away from us, that we start realizing that, wait a minute, you hit a crisis and you go to pray. And that's when you realize, oh my God, I was all this time engaging with and relating to my idol and not my God, relating to my idol, but not my God. So now in this season, to capture our attention, God said, and this was, started in 2020, we all know, he started resetting our homes, resetting jobs, professions, occupations, resetting our churches, resetting our souls and emotional needs, right? Because we're going to talk about that when we say, how does the soul create the idol? Because the reality is that our emotional needs have shifted after 2020. What we consider, absolutely important versus, okay, I can kind of maybe live without that. This made us start reassessing our values. What can we live with and live without? Especially when many things are being threatened to being taken away from us. Food items and, supply chain, all of this with comforts that we're used to having access to, possibly being taken away. It makes you start reassessing your souls and your emotional needs. And it helps you start resetting relationships. Okay, everybody's now, especially with this great divide in the body of Christ, we're all realigning, ourselves in our relationships. Where before, maybe prior to 2020, prior to, this mid 2000s, you would have never found yourself in association with or alignment with certain people or people groups. And now all of a sudden that's being reset. Okay, we're now realigning ourselves differently. Same thing with resetting our priorities. Okay, because now people are prioritizing prayer. We just need to pray. We need to pray. Prayer vigils going up and around the clock. God couldn't get us to, even come to church or come to the table. But now, my God, everybody on their knees. Why? Because of the reset, the disheveling. Okay, all of that. And that God always has to bring a shake up to wake us up. He has to shake up to wake up, because we can get so comfortable and nestled into our ability to control our lives, our situations, our circumstances, and our outcomes. And he allows us to have so much autonomy over certain things that we start thinking that we're in total control of it all. Right. And see, that's what causes idolatry to creep in, because you want to be in control. Secret number one, right? How does the soul create an idol? Because it wants to really be in control of its outcomes. And so when you want to be in control of how things happen to you, you'll create something you can control. That's what they did with the idols. They didn't want a God that was out there making decisions, okay, autonomously by his own will. They didn't want a God doing that. They wanted a God that they could hold in their hand and control. That if I give you this, then you're supposed to give me that. Remember, I rubbed the genie. So I rub the little urn. So I need to, the genie's supposed to come out. I left you an offering. This is supposed to come out. You're supposed to respond in said ways, because that's the relationship we have set up. So a lot of times when we feel out of control, we'll start gravitating towards something we can control. And then that thing can quickly turn into an idol, incidentally, right? We didn't set out. We didn't wake up in the morning to say, I'm going to serve an idol today. But we did wake up in the morning and say, I need settlement. I need security. I need peace. I need, right? So I want you to go ahead in your journals, since we're, working together through this. And just while you're writing, make a note, spend time with God and actually start making my list of what I feel like I need. Your needs. We said last time, you're going to make a list of what comes first, your first thoughts. Now make a list of put list number 2 I need to create is my needs. All right. So we can start working through that, because God is retaking control over the lives and destinies of his people. And I'm retaking control over it by shifting and changing how your life can be lived. God changes one thing in creation, and it shifts the way our whole life can be lived. And that's what starts diverting us back to him, because he said, no, You're not all together like me. Okay. And that I'm still in control. And that when it comes down to it, you know, he who holds, okay, your life in his hands. And so what they say, who holds our future, right? You know who holds tomorrow. All of a sudden, when tomorrow is not out of your control, you all of a sudden know whose hands it is in. Okay. And it's not the things that you've been trusting in and that you've been sacrificing your relationship with God to keep in place, right? It's none of those things which we have to look at when we think about idols. What am I sacrificing? My relationship with God so I can keep this in place, or scared that if I get too deep in God, it's going to force me to have to let go or exchange or sacrifice this particular thing. Because sometimes we will sacrifice closeness with God, intimacy, holiness, sanctification, any of those types of things because we have idols. And we have now idol doctrine that actually promotes and supports our idolatry. Well, God understands. He knows. Well, that's religious. Well, you don't want to be too legalistic. You don't have to do all of that. It doesn't take all of that. Right. Because you're wanting to make room in your heart to keep your idols. You want God to be in the temple with Dagon, sharing with the other gods of your life, so that you don't have to sacrifice, hurt, or be discomforted in order to give him what he wants. See, it's when serving God requires discomfort that we will then create a pseudo pathway, right? And that pathway can become an idol doctrine, IDOL doctrine. And it can produce IDLE, okay? Because IDOL can make you IDLE, right? Idol and idol. So you want to look at that as you're walking and examining the end of 2024. Let me go back through the year, the months, the weeks, and look at where I could have been setting up these idols, having other things on my altar. Did I create a polytheistic, pantheistic temple of the heart where God is having to sit there? And now he is breaking out, causing things to happen into your life, crisis, disturbances. What is this? I don't understand. He's like, are you kidding me? I'll have no other God. Taking Dagon's head off in your life. And you're wondering, what is all this about? Where is it coming from? I don't understand what I'm doing wrong or how this happened. So you want to begin to start looking at that, right? Because we have been taught a polytheistic faith, meaning that you can do God plus, Jesus plus. Oh, I can still call myself a Christian and I can still believe God and not realizing that the and is making room for the idol, right? So it's making room for you to be able to have God share the mantle of your heart with all of those other things. And God's not sharing mantle space any longer in this season of his kingdom, which is why a lot of people are finding the apple of their eye and the heart of their affections being tapped a lot in this time period, because God says, I'm not going to share space. So either you're going to trust in that or you're going to trust in me, but we're not sharing your life, the responsibility for your life. Me and this are not going to share. So we have to make tough decisions as we go into 2025, because God is removing every idol of the heart. And it talks about who can actually ascend into the mount of the Lord, right? When you think about Psalm 24, who's going to be able to ascend and rise in God in this season? Who are going to be the people that rise above it all? Who are going to be the people that soar in the chaos? Who are going to be the people that conquer in the midst of the turmoil? Who are those people? Let's look at Psalm 24 when he talks about who can ascend into the holy hill of the Lord, right? And it says, he who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul to an idol. Did you lift up your soul to certain things? That's what you have to look at. What did I give my soul to this year? When I think about it, I gave my soul over to fears. I gave myself over to concerns, money, opportunities, all of these things that caused me to jeopardize or sacrifice something the Lord wanted me to do, asked of me. Dr. Price has this amazing section in the assessments that is called, what is it? I want to say emotional intelligence. I was trying to think about the umbrella it came under for the assessments, but it comes under the section of your emotional intelligence where she talks about the character, values, and ethics of your emotions or your soul and how that affects your ministry. Well, we not only tell you what your stable character is, but we talk about your greatest threats. And one of the most popular greatest threats is your need to resolve responsibility issues, right? And it's popular because of this we're talking about in this series. So that section really deals with how we handle two responsibilities we have going on in our life concurrently that may be in conflict with each other. Meaning, God is telling you he's called you to ministry, but you're thinking about family, money, okay, time. All of this comes, this, your list of first, right, comes down, and you're looking at all of that. And you're thinking, well, how am I gonna, two responsibilities of equal importance, equal significance. How do I make the choice about which responsibility should come first? And most times we find ourselves in that wrestle. And most time God gets the short end of the stick, right? So we don't often choose God. We often will put him on the shelf on hold while we go and make sure that the other things that are really first in our lives are taken care of. So we have to look at those moments where we have lifted up our soul to an idol, to something, our affections, anything in our life that will cause us to trade off our destiny and purpose, right? And trade off our relationship with God in order for us to live in this pseudo self-indulgent peace, right? Self-made peace, not God-made, self-made peace. As long as I have my creature comforts around me, I'll be okay. But God is going after what we lifted up our souls to in this season. So the household idols, right? Let's look at that. The idols of the heart. And I love this because it says here, Son of Man, Ezekiel 14, dealing with what we're saying about the idols of the heart and what can actually be speaking to you and fueling your life until God takes control, takes preeminence, and you become, you end up in those crazy sovereign circumstances that only the sovereign God can pull you out of. And that's when the idol becomes revealed. So let's look at Ezekiel 14. Son of man, these men have set up their idols in their hearts and put before them that which causes them to stumble into iniquity. Should I let myself be inquired of at all by them? Nobody would tell you about that side of God's personality. That when you do decide to lift up your soul to that idol, that he then makes a decision. Should I allow you to seek me, to pray to me, to petition to me when I know that something else is first in your life? When I know that it's not really me you're seeking, you're trying to figure out how to make sure your idol stays undisturbed and your idol stays protected. God says, I'm not here to protect your idol. I'm here to protect your soul. And so if it comes down to it, I'm going to do my job, which is what is right for your soul, more than what is right for your idol. And a lot of times our souls can get crushed when God is going after, boom, that idol. If he makes a decision that he is going to answer your future and your destiny and not the idol that you're serving at the time. And sometimes he will do that if he knows that you are literally serving this idol in sheer ignorance. Now, if you're deliberately choosing that idol over something that God has asked you to do, something God wants for your life, or what you now understand to be kingdom standards, and you just don't want to comply to them because it hits those idols of your soul, then he's going to say, well, should I even answer your prayer? Should I even allow you to come and seek me about something when I know that you have this idol on the altar, where this is where your heart and your affections really are? This is whom you're really serving. So God will, even when you seek him for prophecy, because many people have done that, but I prayed and I sought God and I asked God to give me the real word and the real truth. And now you see where his attitude is and what his response is, because he's like, but you're not seeking me earnestly, authentically, in truth. You're asking me to protect your idol. Right? So we want to think about that. What exactly is an idol? We went over this last time. Your imaginations, your dreams and passions, your obsession, and your lifestyle. Okay? These are the makings of your idol. These are the trees that you got to go chop down. These are the wood that you're using to put together the image. Remember, we said we have images of how we think our life should be. I always imagined I'd be married by now. I always imagined I'd be making XYZ amount of money right now. I always imagined my life will be here. And see, it's those images that reveal the idol of the heart. What do you imagine? That's list number 3. What am I imagining? What am I meditating on? Where does my mind go? Okay, guys, where does my mind go in a crisis? So when pain, sorrow, crisis, conflict, difficulty hit my life, where does my mind tend to meditate on or float off to? What is the first thing I think about when I realize I can't pay a bill, or, my car is about to be taken away, or, my apartment is whatever, they're about to fire me from my job, whatever the case may be. Where does your heart go? Where does your heart go in its meditations? Where do you start mentally checking out to in order to soothe the pain or try to balance the reality of what you're facing? Because that begins to let you know, right, where you are susceptible to idolatry, where your idols are. Okay, how that pathway is coming in. Because if you find yourself fantasizing about, wow, if I could just have $1 million, my life would be so much better. Right? Thinking that money is really going to fix what's happening in your soul. You've lifted up your soul. So instead of giving your soul to God to work through what's impacting it, what's affecting it, what's causing it to struggle or have difficulty, instead of doing that, right, we lift our soul up to the idol. If I had $1 million, everything would be great. Until you talk to somebody who has $1 million. All right, and then ask them if their life's great. But the reality is that we began to do that. So instead of actually dealing with the sorrow, with the brokenness, why this situation is having this kind of impact on us, instead of doing that, we instead lift it up to an idol to fix it. Fix it, idol. Fix it. Come on, money. Fix my broken heart. Come on, love. Fix my broken heart. So we lift it up to the idol. Does that make sense to you all today? Because you have to go in and do deep examination of where you are in this season. Because God says, I'm coming after idols. And so when we step into 25 and wonder why things are crazy and chaotic and he's tearing down gods and we feel like we're in the plagues of Egypt, you understand I'm dealing with idols. Because if America's going to belong to me, then America's going to belong to me. It's not going to belong to all of these other things that y'all done built into your system. The idols that have become the fabric of the American dream. No, that will not happen if I'm going to be God over this nation, right? We're not doing that. So we got to begin to pull out and look at these particular things. Your dreams, your passions. Y'all know how God busted me? No, you don't want the kingdom dream. You want the American dream. Because what I dream of my kingdom has yet to fill your heart. Eyes have not seen, ears have not heard, nor has it entered the heart of man when it's been prepared for us. He says, so my kingdom dream hasn't even begun to cellulate through you, to be a thought in your mind of what I dream for my kingdom. Because if it were, you would recognize the things that are sabotaging that. How your idols are sabotaging my kingdom dream. Ooh, no, G, no. But it's true, right? I have to go through this evaluation. Everybody has to go through this evaluation. Are my personal dreams sabotaging the kingdom dream? And we do it as the church all the time because we don't have an understanding of the passions of the Christ. And so our obsessions, us being obsessed with having to have something, okay, where we get stuck And we'll go through some of these definitions as we get down to the other parts of the message, right? Because we got about 2 more weeks with each other. So I'm going to expedite and try to get all of that in for you. Okay. Obsessions and lifestyle. Lifestyle. Is it okay that we take our time and walk through it? Because we're going to talk about some things. We're going to leave you with good things to work through. All right. Is God what you want, or the vehicle of what you want? We went through this last time in the introduction, and it says, okay, I, the Lord. Now, we talked about, will God even allow you to ask him something when your heart is full of idols? 2, I, the Lord, will answer him who comes according to the multitude of his idols. So you're thinking your life is being powered by God, being approved by the Holy Spirit, and it's your idol that God is allowing you to live on and to live out the fruit of the worship of your idol. And you're like, wow, it started off so great. How could it turn out like this? I don't understand. In the beginning, I just knew it was God. And it was so wonderful. What happened? It was the idol talking. It was the idol's passion. It was the idol fueling that. And once that thing ran its course, then you started realizing God wasn't in it at all. Because it's the end of a thing that reveals what was there at the first. So if it ended wrong, then you have to say, was God in it from the beginning? And if he was in it, in what way? Was he in it for approval, or was he in it to allow your idol to correct you? So is God really what you want? Or do you just see him as the vehicle to getting that? Because when he's what you want, then you want to convert and conform your whole being to him. Then all of these things become what he wants. But if they're still under what you want, then he might still be just your vehicle and has yet to become your God, right? So we've got to look at that, and we go as we go into 2025. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. And that's the biggest thing, is because you're wanting earthly things for earthly reasons. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have your needs met and needing to have certain things to make your life work on earth. It's when you want them for earthly reasons. It's when, like James said, your wisdom now becomes completely earthly and sensual, where you're not using them for the purposes that God has set or ordained for you from heaven, right? When it's not, let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. It's let thy will be done on earth because I need this on earth. See, that's when it becomes a problem. And you've got to invert your motives so that you go back to, but I want heaven's will for my life, and not all of the earthly accoutrements so that I can have an earthly reward or outcome on something. And that's when it becomes difficult. And that's where the biggest challenge we're going to step into as we step into 2025. It's going to be a real challenge for us in that way of God really coming after what's at the seat, what's at the motive of our hearts. Are your household idols asking to excuse you from your calling? And so we're probably going to pick up right from there next time we get together. I left you with a cliffhanger, didn't I? So when we get back together, are your household idols asking to be excused from your calling? And we're going to look at the parable of the wedding feast. I mentioned it in the intro, but when we get back together, we're going to actually walk through it so that you can see how the soul over time begins to build idols, how it creates its idol. And it creates something that it can control, that it can define to meet its needs. God, I don't need you to tell me what's wrong. I've already defined what's wrong. If you give me this $1,000,000, if you give me this job, if I could get this man, if you could give me this promotion, if I could get this position, if you could just get me around the world in 80 days, if I could have a followership of 9 million people. See, I already know what's wrong with my soul. I don't need that. What I need is for you to just do these things. Ask yourself, have I lifted up my soul to an idol, right? Have I lifted up my soul to an idol? That is what I want you to remember as we go through this entire journey, okay, together, of how the soul creates an idol. We'll be back next week. We're going to go through the parable of the wedding feast, and then we're going to talk about a little bit of your soul functionality, and then we're going to leave you with, by the end of the month, how your soul creates that idol and how to begin to move it and actually realign yourself back to what God's good and acceptable and perfect will for your life is. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next week. Until then, go fight, win, and conquer. Stay right here on the page as we get ready for our Sunday morning service that kicks off with 10 a.m. with the one and only Dr. Paula A. Price. God bless you guys. Have a blessed rest of the day. And remember, assess, assess, assess. Don't hide. Just get back on the Lord's side.